part of the reason why Washington Valley is as untouched as it is an accident of fate. A good many years ago, the municipal authorities decided to try to build a reservoir in this area. And in that process, they bought a lot of property. The reservoir turned out to be unworkable, and furthermore, we fought it tooth and nail, finally defeating it. But by the time it was defeated, the MUA controlled a great deal of property, which they use for waterlands today. But it means that we have untouched, lovely open space, traversed by trout streams, full of wetlands, second growth forest, which we think benefits the entire community. We also have our lovely 19th century schoolhouse, which we care for meticulously. The association, which is centered on the schoolhouse, helps to maintain the community spirit, which is very clearly here. We did fight off the reservoir. We fought off a psychiatric hospital. We fought off a jail. And this community spirit is what has enabled us to work together. We know each other. We all meet at the pancake breakfast or at the schoolhouse for one reason or another. The valley was farmed long before the Revolution. But by the time Washington soldiers were camped at Jockey Hollow, which is right next to our historic district, the valley was inhabited. Some of the houses that were there when Washington soldiers walked past are still here. It is particularly important that Washington Valley be preserved because it is so close to urban areas. We are close to Morristown, we're close to urban Essex County, and New York City, of course.
Washington Valley is a very special place because it's a historic area and it brings together in a small space a beautiful county park with trails for walking, hiking, horseback riding, mountain biking, and also a federal park, Jockey Hollow. Anybody has access to this area. Small children can enjoy this area. You can walk along the paths and you can see all the wonderful wildflowers. And at this time of year, the fall, the paths are covered with brilliant maple leaves, winged euonymus, all sorts of beautiful trees drop their colorful leaves at this time. This is an area where there are a lot of tributaries, streams, and rivers that feed our water supply, and we'd like to keep those pure for everybody, which is very, very important.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Morristown was a fascinating place. About 400 millionaires came to Morristown to live because of the easy proximity to New York City. They could take the train into New York City. And many of them bought up some of the farmland and the farmhouses and incorporated them into gentleman farms, either building big estates or enlarging some of the farmhouses that were there. What this did was to be able to keep some of the open spaces that was here from the colonial times, from the 1700s, continue to keep it open for pasture land and grazing, because some of these millionaires were into farming, gentleman farms. Many of them were experimenting with breeding Jersey cattle, such as Charles Foster. He enlarged this farm here to 200 acres and was the second man in Morristown to import purebred Jersey cattle. And there was other people here in the area that followed suit. the Del Barton area, Luther Kuntz was considered a gentleman farmer. And his estate up there is wonderful because so many of the original buildings are still there, although they have been adapted for other uses. 150 years ago, the inhabitants got together to build a small schoolhouse, which was a schooling area for their farm children. And today, this little schoolhouse still is the center of the valley, and it houses the Washington Valley Community Association, a group of families that continue to meet, and the traditions that were started of different events that we have down there continue today. I think another fascinating part about Washington Valley in terms of community is the Washington Valley Home Economics Group that started, and this came out of working with the World War I effort in 1917 to roll bandages. And many of the farm women came to Washington Valley Schoolhouse to help with that. They're a group that really works hard to keep the schoolhouse up and to contribute to a lot of the sense of community within Washington Valley. Where we're standing now, the Willows, which was the home of Charles and Carolyn Foster, was built in 1854 as a gentleman's estate by Joseph Revere, who was the grandson of Paul Revere. And when he left to move into Morristown, another person rented this house named Bret Harte. He was well known for some of his novels, The Luck of Roaring Camp, which dealt a lot with California mining life. While he was renting this house, he gathered material for a very small little book he wrote called Thankful Blossoms, which was about Morristown, a little romance set in the 1700s. And while living here, he wandered through Washington Valley and gathered material for this book. Namely, two of the farms that are still standing, the two farmhouses, were basis for scenes that he wrote about in this little book, as well as an illustration that he had done of a brick wall, and that brick wall is still standing in Washington Valley. Washington Valley had so many patriots within its confines. Jacob Arnold himself was in the cavalry that was guarding George Washington on his first stay here in 1777-78. And his tavern, Jacob Arnold's Tavern, was the headquarters for Washington, for the first headquarters that he had. One of our farmhouses here on the Foster Fields property was a headquarters for one of George Washington's generals. Revolutionary War cannonballs were found in the back fields when they plowed them up. And it is not unlikely that Washington would have walked through Foster Fields, through Washington Valley, to get to where he wanted to go, or on horseback. As an aside, I know Miss Foster was so disappointed to see all these places become developed. She would go up and down Madison Avenue and remember the huge estates. The farms that she interacted with are now all developments, except for hers. And she was forward-thinking in that, and I think we need people to really think forward-thinking about preserving such a unique area as Washington Valley, and it's we need more of places like this.